I want to lead this off by well, admitting to something. This is sort of a sequel or a companion piece to a presentation that was done last Friday by Kathy Wilkins, the wonderful HR manager here at CBT Nuggets. And coming into it, I kind of expected to say, yeah, Kathy was great, but that's all HR stuff. You don't need to worry about that. I'm here to tell you about how to get actually hired. And I got to offer a mea culpa to Kathy. She knocked it out of the park. She had really great, intelligent insight, the kind of stuff that I cared about, even as a person who's, got boots on the ground. I'm doing the actual hiring. She seemed to know what was needed and what was important there as well. So hopefully you got a chance to watch that, either live on Friday or the pre-recorded session. That's okay if you didn't. I'm going to touch on it a little bit. It's available up on YouTube. You can watch after this. That's really great stuff, and I'm going to circle back to some of the things she said later. But that's really good stuff, and it's really important. But this is all about the interview. This is all about how you can help yourself get hired and get an edge when you're sitting down and talking face-to-face across the desk from an interviewer. And I wanted to give you some really unique insight in this process because I think that any of us or all of us have gotten a lot of advice over the years about interview techniques. You know the old stories: wear a suit, sit up straight, smile, firm handshake. Yeah. All of that is absolutely true. I'm not disagreeing with any of that. But you can get that anywhere. You can hear that anywhere. I wanted to find a little bit of a different or unique take on this, and I think I'm able to offer it because, well, I've had a lot of jobs in my career. I've been interviewed a lot of times, and I've also spent a lot of times on the other side of the desk. I've spent a lot of time interviewing candidates in a number of different positions. So as far as the tips and tricks go, I want you to hold one thing over this entire presentation, this entire discussion. And I want you to remember this with everything that we talk about because this is the overriding tip, the overriding goal of what I'm trying to communicate to you. If you take nothing else away from this, take away this. The person interviewing you is not your enemy. They are your ally. They are your friend. Look, the easiest way to get a job is to have someone, a friend, a colleague, a coworker, someone you know that already works in the job you want or already works at the company you want, right? They're an advocate for you. They're an ally for you. But that's not always the case, particularly when you're cold calling resumes or job openings from the web. You don't have a friend in that position. You don't have someone to be your ally there. Well, that person interviewing you, the person sitting across your desk, can be your ally. I think we're trained to treat interviews a little bit combatively as sort of a challenge situation where it's us versus them, and they don't want to hire us, they don't want to be there with us, and we have to convince them, or we have to find a way to change their mind about something so that they'll hire us. But that just isn't true. When people are interviewing you, they're interviewing you because they want to hire you. They are primed to be your friend, to be your ally. They're primed to be that advocate for you. They're not interviewing you for fun. They're not interviewing you because their company has a policy that they have to interview people even when they don't need to. They're interviewing you because there's an opening. They've lost somebody, or they've expanded their team, or they've expanded the workload, and they need people to come in and do that work for them. You are that person. You can be that person. So your job throughout your entire interview is not to convince them to hire you. Your job is to give them the ammunition they need to convince their superiors to hire you. Because hiring, except in really small organizations, hiring is a multi-person affair. You have to convince a number of people at that organization that you're the right candidate for the job. So treat that person on the other side of your desk like your friend, your ally, the person who's going to be an advocate for you, who's going to be talking about how great and awesome you are and how excited they are to work with you. Keep that in mind. Remember that in every interaction you have in an interview, and you're going to do great. You're going to be so much better. But it's easier said than done. So what are some ways that you can ensure that you get that across and that you recruit that person as your ally, that interviewer as your ally? Well, the number one thing I like to talk about is be passionate about what you do. This is really a general interview tip. I don't think this is IT specific. But one question when I was interviewing people that I always asked right up front was, I always said, how did you get into IT? I'm a software developer, so it was always, how did you get interested in software development? How did you get there? And I wasn't asking that for no reason. That wasn't just a general question to get the person talking. I was fishing for a really specific answer. I wanted to hear the passion about IT, about software development, come through in their answer. I wanted them to talk about the first time they ever did something with computers. They ever plugged in a router or programmed a little script or something, and how much they enjoyed it and how much fun it was. I was looking for an attitude that demonstrates they enjoy doing this and that they like doing this, because this is a hard job. This is a tough job. It involves a lot of interaction. There's constant education as things change. There's, you've got weekend hours and night hours when you're squashing bugs and dealing with production outages. So you really have to be passionate about it and interested in it. And I'm not going to lie, I've gotten some really bad answers to that question. Sometimes people just say, oh, well, that's what I majored in college, or, and that's a horrible answer. That doesn't sound like you're passionate about the job. That just sounds like it's what you chose to do. You looked it up on a list and you chose it. I genuinely, I'm not going to lie, this is a true story. I once had someone answer that question by telling me, well, they majored in IT until their junior year of college, and then they switched to something, I don't remember what it was, totally unrelated, marketing or something. And they were unable to get a job with that degree, so they thought they'd try this IT thing again. They looked me in the eye and they told me this. Like, it wasn't even their first choice. They were just falling back on it because they kind of did it a little bit in college. I mean, that person is not getting hired. I'm not excited to work with that person. I'm not excited to hire them. I'm not going to be talking to my boss about this great guy who, kind of likes IT but doesn't really know anything about it. So be passionate about it. Find a way to talk about what makes you excited about it. And, a lot of people aren't going to ask you that question directly like I did. Like I said, I was fishing for that answer. But you're always going to get a general question in an interview, tell me about yourself, or some kind of open-ended question that's going to give you an opening to take it in that direction. And I highly recommend you do. Make sure they understand that you love and enjoy doing this. And a great way to do that is my second point here. Examples, examples, examples. IT is unique in that we can oftentimes bring examples or demos of our work right to the table. This is true, especially now that virtualization is so big. You can build examples. You can demonstrate your work right there live in the interview if you want, or at the very least you can talk about it and tell the interviewer about what you have done that's available publicly. So if you're interviewing for a development position, have some work done. Have it available on a website that can be publicly accessible, that you can say to the interviewer, hey, your computer's right there, fire up this URL, check out what I've done. If you're talking about networks infrastructure stuff, virtualization is a big deal and just as easy as well these days. So, bring that stuff to the table. That really helps tie into the passionate part, because you demonstrate that you want to do it, that you know how to do it, that you're willing to sit down even on your own time and do some of this stuff. Another great thing about examples is that it gets you over that hump of, well, they want someone with experience, but how do you get experience if you can't get the job? That old paradox. They only want to hire people with experience, but you can't get the job until you have experience. It circles on itself. One way that you can wedge into that little paradox is to do some work on your own. Bring some examples, even if it's little things. In fact, it should be little things. They shouldn't be large, complicated examples. They should be little, simple, straightforward examples that show you know how to apply the technology. You know how to do what it is that they are looking for someone to do for this job position. It's such a huge and powerful effect to see even just a little bit of working code or a working example of what they need done. It has a profound impact on how that interviewer is going to view you. And what else it does? It kind of shows off this next point here. Competence always wins the day. I think that this is really, really an important point. And I know a lot of you might be thinking, well, that's true of every job, right? I mean, competence, that's what they want. They want the most competent people. But I can tell you that's not exactly true of every job. My wife, for instance, is an attorney, and I'm going to get myself in trouble if she ever hears me tell this. But, it's not always the best attorney that's going to get a job when they're hiring at a firm. A lot of times they want to know which attorney is going to bring in the most work. How big is your network? How many referrals do you bring in, right? Because if you're a mediocre attorney, but a lot of people come to you for attorney work, you're going to bring a lot of work into the firm. You're going to bring a lot of money into the firm, and that's more important to them. So in their case, competence is not at the top of the list. But when it comes to IT, things need to work. That's always the most important. You need to know what you're doing. You need to be able to do it. Competence always wins the day when you're interviewing for an IT job, and you want to demonstrate that in the interview. You want to make sure that your interviewer knows that you're competent, that you know what you're talking about. And if you're not comfortable, you're not competent in a topic, we'll be open and honest about that, because that demonstrates a different level of competence, a competence in understanding your own limitations and the gaps in your own knowledge. There are ways to cover over that. You can talk about your dedication to learning. Hey, hopefully you're all CBT Nuggets subscribers. I would mention that. But it's a really important topic, a really important thing to make sure they understand that you are competent. And then the last point here, demonstrate interest in the position. This is another general one, but it really, really shows. We're going to talk in the next few minutes. I'm going to go over a few example job openings that were brought down for the webinar last week for the HR webinar. And I'm going to talk about how you can look at those job interviews and or look at those job postings and understand what the interviewer might be looking for when they're cycling up that interview. So you want to demonstrate the interest. You want to demonstrate to the interviewer that you know what the job is, or if you don't know what the job is, you're asking questions about it. What are the daily tasks here? What kind of stuff do we do? Do we use this technology? Do we use this technology? Are you interested in this? Ask those questions. Pull it out of them. It demonstrates excitement. It demonstrates interest in the position. And it really helps you stand out, and it helps make that person on the other side of the table your ally. So I talked about a couple of sample job applications or job positions, job openings. I'm going to go through those now. And then I'll talk a little bit about resume tips that I think might help you. So let's bring up the first one here. And if you want to see, this is a live job opening that was available online. You can bring it up right here at this URL. And this is for a network security engineer. So when I first looked at this, the first thing that I noticed is it's a very detailed, specific job to look after. They have a whole list of required qualifications, and they're really specific. They want defensive cyber operations. They want an MS or a PhD, top secret security clearance. So they have really specific and narrow, definite requirements for this job. So what you want to do, I think, when you're interviewing for a job like this, when you're reading a job description like this, and you see these things come down where it looks very specific, you want to make sure that you're specific. When you're talking to that interviewer, you want to talk about your skills, your certifications, your things that match up, that line up with this exact job description right here. Kathy Wilkins, again in that HR webinar, brought this up a little bit. She grabbed the resume. There was a sample resume that went along with this job description, and she moved all the skills right up to the top. And I agree with that wholeheartedly, because these people, this job right here, is curious in your specific skills and wants to know if they match up with the specific qualifications required for the position. So be specific. But there's another interesting point here, and that is find a way to separate yourself. I think jobs like this, you don't want to just be a list of skills, because a lot of people are going to come in with those same list of skills, and it's tough to say, hey, I'm better at skill X than he is, right? No one necessarily believes you. It's kind of a tough thing to convince somebody of. So find a way to separate yourself, and that can be anything at all, whether it's bringing in examples like I talked about, or showing a way to, showing some creativity or something different that you bring to this particular work in this particular position. But anything that you can do to differentiate or highlight how you are not just another set of skills that they're looking at is going to help you in that interview, and it's going to help that interviewer remember you, and it's going to help them like you and want to hire you again. They want to bring you in to the job or into the position. The next job opening here is almost the exact opposite. This is a really crazy job posting here. And the thing that's crazy about this job posting, if you read it, and I know this might be a little bit small on your screen, but you can always check out the job postings here at these links. Note the broad description and responsibilities here. I mean, this job basically says you have to do everything. Installing new hardware, configuring it, coordinating projects, ensure projects are completed in a timely manner, monitoring network performance, troubleshooting. The list goes on and on and on. I'm looking at this and I'm like, who fits this job description? Everyone fits this job description, because everyone's going to hit a couple of these points. This is a job description that requires a ton of stuff. So how do you apply for this job? How do you get yourself, being specific is no longer the appropriate approach to a job like this. So I think one of the things you want to do is you want to sell your adaptability and your ability to learn in a job like this. One of the things that's really important in this is that no one is going to be all of these things all of the time. No applicant is going to be able to check off every box on this job description and say, yes, that's me, yes, that's me, yes, that's me. So what you want to do is you want to say, you know what, I can do all these things, but I'm really great at learning and bringing on new tasks. I really understand how to expand my knowledge. I've learned how to do this over my career. I've learned how to do this. I love learning. I'm always adaptable. When the job requires me to do this, I'm able to do this. When the job requires me to do this, I'm able to do this. Another important point about this job description, I think, is to find hotspots that stand out. And what I mean by hotspots, well, there's one thing that really jumped out at me here, and you're going to see this sometime in job descriptions. But look at this right here under qualifications. Ability to deal effectively with all staff members, exercising tact, diplomacy, and patience at all times. Now, that's kind of an odd thing to see in a job description because I feel like that's a built-in part of any job. But the fact that they typed it into this job description means that there's a reason they put it there. You know what? Maybe the previous occupant of this job didn't exercise tact and diplomacy and patience. That happens in IT, unfortunately, sometimes. And they didn't like that, and they didn't want that. So that should jump out. Something like that should really jump out at you, and you should be able to speak to that in your interview. You should, in your interview, demonstrate tact and diplomacy and patience. And you should, you can even call it right out. You can say, I noticed under the qualifications it asks for this. Here's why I think that I'm going to fit that need. I'm going to fit that qualification. There's another neat thing about this job description in that it has, under the education experience, some competing points, the first and the last one. So the first one says any combination of education experience and training that provides the required knowledge. The last one says minimum 3 years experience. So again, this gets into that age-old paradox of I can't get a job without the experience, but I can't get the experience without a job. Well, here's a crack in that. Here's an opening. Those two things are contradictory. At the top, it says, hey, if you've got the experience from education, then you can do this. At the bottom, it says you need minimum 3 years experience. When I see that as an opening. I can get this job if I don't have the 3 years experience. I can get a job at this organization. They're looking to hire people. They put this one first. This any combination item is first. The minimum 3 years is at the bottom. So I see that and I say, you know what? I've got the combination of education, experience, and training that gives me the knowledge and ability to work for you guys, and that's what I'm going to address, and that's a wedge point in there to get in there as well for this particular job. The third job position that they talked about, and this is probably the one I like the best. I think it's the easiest and most straightforward one to speak to, and not because it's a job for a trainer, but because it's very clear, concise about what it wants and what they are looking for out of their applicant, without being overly burdensome. Like that first one was just, requirement after requirement after requirement. This here says, look, you need a bachelor's degree, you need to have these certifications. There's a nice list of descriptions up here. So when I look at a job description like this, I say, hey, you know what? I can do all this. I've got these certifications, or I can get these certifications. I meet all the requirements. Look beyond the technical requirements. When you feel a job that you really, really identify with and you're really focused on, go to your interview and, say that. I mean, it's okay to be confident and to say, look, I'm perfectly suited technically. I'm perfectly suited to this job. I have the technical and education and experience requirements that you need for this position. And then speak to things beyond the technical requirements. Like this one here says, ability to prepare students and excellent verbal and written communication skills. So talk about that. You know what? Be like, hey, so above and beyond all the technical certifications that I need, I'm great at teaching, or I'm great at talking to people. I'm always teaching people. I'm always helping out with this. These are the things that I can help you do in this job. And also going back to what I talked about off the top, examples. Prepare demonstrable skills. This is a job position that's going to require some, what's the word I'm looking for? Some extroversion from you. It's going to require you to be out there a little bit. So be prepared to do some of that stuff. Show that off, and bring it up. If you've got it prepared and the employer doesn't ask to see that, say, hey, look, here's the things that I can do. Here's how I'd be a good trainer or a good instructor for this material. So hopefully those things help you understand a little bit about how to read job positions, job openings, and how to tailor yourself during your interview. Again, all the way always going back to making the interviewer your ally. You want to make them your friend. You want to make them your advocate at that company. So I just want to finish off with a couple of everyone loves resume tips. I think Kathy Wilkins did a great job. Watch that Hangout recording right down here on YouTube. She really hits the nail on the head with that, and a lot of the things and the changes that she makes to those resumes, they are great. But just to recap a couple of things that I liked that she said, you know what, keep your technical skills front and center. Right on the page, right at the top of the page, underneath your contact details, is a bullet list of your technical skills. On my resume, I have a bulleted list, only 3 or 4 words per bullet, of expertise with. That's what the heading is on it. And those are the things, those are the technologies that I feel comfortable that I'm an expert in, that I can sit down and I can work on. If I'm asked about them in an interview, or I could talk about them all day long. It's right there on the front page. It's a third of the way down the page. It's the very first thing that someone's going to see when they look at your resume. Similar to that, make sure your most relevant job experience is on the first page of the resume. Everyone kind of builds resumes based off templates. Templates always have job experience in order of date. I'm not a huge fan of that, or at least I'm not a huge fan of being that of making that the most important order. I think what you want to do is you want to ensure that that first page has your most relevant job experience. So if you've had a couple of jobs since the one that's most relevant, well, get that relevant one up to the top. Get it right, again, front and center, right underneath those skills. But at the same time, do not confine yourself to a single page if you don't have to. This is a weird one. I think you've heard this, some of us, many of us have probably heard this a lot during our lifetime and our careers, is that, hey, make your resume one page, squeeze your resume into one page, right? And that's so people don't have to deal with multiple pages. Forget that. Throw it right out. Scrap it. First of all, 99% of people are looking at your resume on PDF. They don't care how many pages it is. Second of all, squeezing your resume onto one page, making the margins tiny, or getting a ton of information in little font is it's just not it doesn't make you look good. It's not a great way to present yourself, and there's no point to it. There's no reason. If you have 2 pages worth of information about yourself to communicate, put 2 pages in there. If it takes up 3 pages, put 3 pages in there. The important thing is to get the most important stuff onto the front page, onto the first page, but don't feel needlessly confined to a single page. Another good point is to exclude older, irrelevant work experience. So, you know what? You remember that job you had scooping ice cream in high school? It's probably time to get that off your resume. I mean, it's great and all that you did that, but it doesn't speak to what you're trying to do right now. And this is true even if you're a recent college graduate trying to get your first job. You want to get that off your resume because it just isn't relevant. It's taking up space, and it looks like it's taking up space. The person interviewing you doesn't really care if you scooped ice cream, if you flipped burgers. Look, if you want to bring up the fact that you've been employed since you were 15 years old, that's great. Bring it up in the interview. Talk about, say, hey, I'm responsible. I've always had a job. That's fine. That's great, but don't put it on your resume. And then the last thing is brevity is good, but clarity is better. So you always want to be as short and brief as you can on your resume. Get to the point, explain what you're trying to explain, but always be clear. That's more important if it takes an extra sentence or an extra few words to be clear. Be clear about what you're trying to say. All right, and with that, we are at 1:23, so we've got some time for questions. Hopefully we'll get some here. I think I see a question over here. What do you feel about dates in your resume? Roger Batoto is asked. Dates are important for your work history. They might be important for your certification history. Obviously, a certification that's 3 or 4 or 5 years out of date might not be as relevant as one that you got last year. That's about the only place I would include it. And, I would include as broad a date as possible. I mean, anywhere you can just indicate a year, indicate a year. If you need to include a month, include the month. I wouldn't worry about days. Again, this gets down to brevity and clarity, I think. Get the dates off there where you don't need them. You just want to indicate, hey, I worked at that company in 2006, from 2006 to 2008, or I took this certification in 2009. That's probably enough. If they want more specific times or more specific dates, you bring that information to the interview and they can ask you and you can supply it. What are some good things to do in college to prepare for building a resume? That's a really good question, William. William Sullivan wants to know that. So in college, what you want to do to build your resume is, you want to be involved in extracurricular clubs or activities. Anything you can do, like an internship, is going to look good. You want to put that right on your resume. You want to, like I talked about at the top, examples. When you learn about a technology or when you realize there's a new technology, sit down and play with it, work with it. Build something, even if it's a really little, simple, small, quick something. If it's functional, if it works, if you show up at an interview having never had a job before, but you're able to point that interviewer to a functional something that you've built using that technology, man, you're light years ahead of your peers there. It's such an important way to address and to approach an interview. It's saying, hey, look, I can't just talk about this. I can do it as well. What about my photo in my CV? Sami Kled. In IT, I would say leave it off. I don't see the point in it. I don't much care about a photograph. This is me speaking. I can't imagine what the relevance to a photograph on your CV or your resume would be. It just kind of looks gawky and weird. And unless you have a really high quality professional photograph, it's going to look a little bit blurry, a little bit strange. You know what? Your photos on your LinkedIn page. They want to see what you look like. Make sure you've got a link to your LinkedIn page, and make sure you've got a nice photo up there of yourself. But you don't need a photo on your CV. It's about what you can do, not about what you look like. I think that's probably my best option there. Let's see, Darren Johnston. Let's say you've been working at your current job for 10 years. Prior to that, my other jobs were non-IT, security guard. Do you recommend leaving it out? Darren, yeah, I do actually, because it is going to look like you only worked one job, but it's going to be 10 years a job. And more importantly, it's going to be a relevant job. A security guard, you can even, if you really want to get that information in there, maybe find a small paragraph or something after your job experience to say, I've held a variety of other jobs as well, doing things like this and this and this. Unless there's a reason that you think being a security guard is relevant to the job that you're applying for, just get it out of there. It takes up space, and it looks like padding, to be perfectly honest. Things like that look like you're trying to just fill out your resume just because you're, like you said, you're worried about only having one job. Well, don't be worried about only having one job. You know what you're doing. You did that job for 10 years and you're good at it. You can stand on that information by itself, and that's the more important part. Salvador, if a job seeker has 20 to 30 years experience, can this work against him or her if it's specified in the resume? The only way that's going to work against them, Salvador, is if it comes along with a salary expectation. Sometimes people are hiring for junior positions. Sometimes they're expecting to hire somebody right out of college or somebody with minimal experience, and they're expecting to pay for that person. Someone walks in with 30 years experience. The question is going to be, can we afford this guy? He's going to cost more than this job has. That's not always fair, and that's a really tough question to answer. So, I guess my answer to that would be, if you've got that level of experience, try to find jobs where it's appropriate. Or you don't think that it will be a challenge. If you find a job that you really like, address that head on. You can, again, these are things you can bring up with the interviewer. They are your ally. They're not a puzzle to be solved. They're not a challenge, a mountain to be climbed. They're your friend. They're your advocate. You'd be like, hey, I know I've got a ton of experience. You're probably anticipating hiring somebody with less experience for less money. Well, here's why I think I'm still the right person for the job. Flynn Bell, should you ever apologize in an interview? Well, I guess if you do something that requires apologizing, I would say yes. The bigger question is, what are you apologizing for? I think would be my return question. But I'm not going to. It's not going to stick in my mind that you apologized for something and be like, well, I don't want this person because they apologized for being this or that or that or this. It probably whatever you said or did that requires an apology is the thing that's going to stick in my mind. If that helps, that's a tough question to answer. I'm not sure quite how you want to do that there. How do my home lab translates into work experience? Roger Patoto is asking again. So this is where I think virtualization comes into play. But even if you don't have things virtualized, if you've just done it, write it up. I mean, honestly, if you can write up a one-page document about a home lab that you've built and put together and designed, and you can talk about what you did, that's enough. I mean, that's fine. The interviewer can't sit down and use it and look at it and know that you did it, but it goes a long, long way to demonstrating that you can do the things you say you can do, and that you like doing the things that you say that you're going to do. Vijay Patel wants to know, any suggestion how I can sharpen my presentation? Well, if you're just talking about your presentation in an interview, again, I always think that being casual isn't the word I want, but being relaxed and being friendly is more important than anything else. Obviously, you want to wear a suit to an interview. You want to look people in the eye. You want to smile. You want to shake their hand. You don't want to look down. You don't want to talk into your chest. You want to lift up your chin. You want to look people right in the eye. I got this job at CBT Nuggets because I was, frankly, being a little bit cavalier in my interview. I wasn't entirely invested in my interview, and that actually worked in my favor because I was just really friendly and outgoing with the guys who were interviewing me, with the folks at CBT Nuggets, and that can really work in your favor as well if you just, again, you don't treat it like a challenge. It's not a puzzle to be solved. It's not something to be unlocked. It's something that you want to do. You're having fun, and you're there to talk to this person who's going to be your friend and you guys are going to talk about how you're going to get you hired there. You know, you're going to say, hey, here's what makes me great. And you want to have fun with it, and you want to be relaxed and confident and all these things that hopefully you've learned. You know, if it helps to look in a mirror and practice in a mirror, go ahead and do that. But find a way to really get used to being just comfortable talking about yourself and talking about what you can do. Last question here. In the interview, if there is a quotation you don't know about, what we say, can we go around, or we just say, I don't know? You hear a lot of different advice on this. You want my personal opinion. If you don't know the answer to something, just flat out say, I don't know. I'll coming right back here to CBT Nuggets. I was asked during my interview about training on a specific technology, which I didn't know. And you know, they said to me, hey, can you train this? And I said, well, I said, I don't know anything other than how to spell it, but I can do it. I can learn it, and I can train on it. I can do it. It's really important to be honest and to not present yourself falsely. If you don't know, not everyone knows everything. This is really, really, really important. Not everyone knows everything and has done everything. It's okay to say, I don't know. As a trainer, I'm often in front of a room full of people, dozens or hundreds of people, and I will get questions about things that I don't know. And the temptation is strong because I'm supposed to be this authority figure who's speaking to a room full of people to know everything. And I got to fight that temptation. I got to look and say, you know what? I don't know, but I can figure it out. We can figure it out. And that's the attitude. That's an attitude that I think is so much more important. Is, yeah, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. I can learn it, right? Because that's what we've done our whole careers. That's what IT is all about. When do you present letters of recommendation, examples of documentation? Typically, it'll be asked for. A lot of times these days, they don't really look for letters of recommendation. But you can always ask about that. If you're getting near the end of the interview and they haven't asked, you can say, hey, I brought some letters of recommendation. Would you like these? You know, is this information you're interested in? These folks can speak to me. Demonstration, again, there's always going to be an opening in an interview where they leave it a little bit open-ended. Is there anything else you'd like to know? Is there anything else you'd like to tell us? Tell me about yourself. Whatever the case might be, there's just always kind of that angle, that way to bring in stuff. Any interviewer worth their salt is gonna leave an open-ended point there where you can bring that stuff to attention. If that doesn't happen, if you end up on one of these kind of less popular, more super structured interviews, you know, follow-up email is always appropriate, of course. You know, that afternoon or the next morning after you've interviewed, and include that information there. There's always a way to get it in. What if they ask about giving an example of something you failed at? So I think that goes back to the little bit of honesty. You know, I think you approach that head on. You don't want to hide. You don't want to hide that information, but you do want to try to paint it in the best possible light. So if you're asked to demonstrate or talk about something that you failed at, well, what you want to do, I think, in my opinion, is you want to say, look, the first time I reached that challenge or I saw that opportunity, I didn't measure up, but here's what I've done to improve, or here's how I believe that I can address that better now, or here's what I think that I would need in order to address that. Resiliency is so much more important than being perfect right off the bat. All of us fail at, all the time in all the number of different things. Everyone does all the time. We don't know everything. We're not great. We're not perfect. It's much more important to demonstrate that we can bounce back. We can learn from those failures, bounce back, and move forward and still be comfortable and confident in ourselves than it is to try to pretend to be perfect all the time to everyone. So that's it for the questions, it looks like. So again, I want to say thanks to everyone for joining. Remember, your interviewer is your friend. They are your ally. Keep that in mind with every interaction, everything you say to them, everything you do. Always remember that they already want to hire you. You just need to give them a little nudge in the right direction. All right, well, I think that's it. Thanks so much, everybody.